Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Lead Podcast, where our intention is to support the development of future and current industry leaders. I'm really excited for today's conversation, and I think it's an opportunity for me as I'm a host in this episode, but just to listen. We have a remarkable guest that we're going to introduce here in a second. But I really encourage you, if you are a leader, especially an emerging leader, to take the time to hear this episode, but get out a notepad, take notes, and most importantly, take action for your development. That said, Kim, so great to see you.
Hello, hello. Nice to see everyone. I have the absolute pleasure today to introduce one of my mentors and a dear friend of mine, Greg Creed, the former CEO of Yum Brands. Not only did he come up with two of my favorite products, the Baja Blast and Crunchwrap, and obviously, I think that speaks to the scale of networking and partnerships with different brands and how you work with those to come up with some iconic things. But also, the author of Red Marketing. So I think he will speak to this through there. But the book is readily available on Amazon, and I definitely encourage everyone to go and get it. So with further ado, I think we can introduce the rest of the team. But Greg, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it very much.
It's my absolute pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And today we're going to talk about the customer experience will never exceed the team member experience. So, Kim, where do you want to start this conversation on that topic?
I think that's the perfect segue to what we are focusing on as the team at Lead is, for emerging leaders, how outside of getting your book, how are they able to focus on becoming better? What can they do when they show up to work every day to kind of get attention of other people? um, to make sure that they're highlighting themselves and doing brand promotion internally, but then also do better. And I know you've done and still are doing a lot of things for people upcoming in the workspace.
Yeah, yeah. Now, look, I think the most important thing is to come to work and be your true self. You can't be, anyone else. If you try to be, you'll be a second version of anyone else, right? So, and by the way, all of us are not perfect. I mean, none of us are perfect. So, but it's about the more genuine and the more real that you can be. I believe the more successful you will be because people want to real, genuine authenticness. What no one likes is someone who's like, oh, I see them at work, they're like this, and I see them outside of work, and there's like something completely different. So my line always used to be, turn up and be your true self, unless your true self is a serial killer, in which case we don't want you to be your true self. We'd like you to turn up and be something different, right? So, and that what that means also is you need to find a culture in which you can be your true self. Because there are some cultures that are going to force you into, well, you have to dress like this, you have to behave like this, you have to speak like this, you have to do whatever. So I think when you're starting out, particularly when you're starting out in your career, it's really important that you find a place where you can bring your true self to work. And if you can't bring your true self and you find yourself having to be something that you're not, then as tough as it is, I would say, you know what, you probably need to find somewhere else to work because you will be your best when you are your true self. And so, I mean, a good example, I worked at PepsiCo, I worked at Unilever, I worked at Yum. I probably wouldn't have been a great employee at McDonald's. McDonald's are operators, they're more serious. I ran Taco Bell, which was, I think someone said was like a frat house. So that's sort of like who I am. And, if someone wants to put me in a tie and a jacket, that's just not who I am. And I didn't come from an operating background either. So, I think you've got to find the place and you'll know very, very early on if you're in the right place for you to be your true self. But if everyone's telling you how to behave differently, how to dress differently, how to think differently, and all that sort of stuff, you probably need to do yourself a favor and find somewhere else. And then I think the second thing is early in your career, and I did this myself early in my career. I didn't know the sort of consequences, but I've always said, do the jobs no one else wants to do. And everybody's sort of like, there's a job everybody wants to do. But if you do the job everybody wants to do and you do it okay, then you're just like everybody else. I think there are jobs in every organization. There are jobs in every restaurant. That sort of the people, I don't want to do that job. I want to do the other job. I think the way you make a name for yourself, and I mean this in a genuine way, not a superficial way, is to tackle the jobs that no one else wants to do, or to tackle the jobs that are really tough or they're really hard, because that's how you make a name for yourself, which is if you can do something that no one else wants to do, and B, you can do it better than anyone else has done it. That's how you make a name for yourself. Like doing the easy jobs or the popular jobs or whatever, that doesn't make you distinguished. So I think the two things really early in your career to focus on: find a culture in which you can be your true self. And then if you can, try and do the jobs that no one else is doing.
Greg, when you think about your journey,
Yeah.
how long do you think it took you to find the fit, right? To find your true self, to find that culture that you fit in with? Did it take a couple tries, or is that something that evolved?
No, I actually got lucky in a sense. My first job, which was a company called Unilever, it was in the soaps and detergents business before I got into the restaurant business. Um, but I got genuinely lucky because while I didn't necessarily fit in, they enabled me to be me. And so you don't always have to necessarily. It doesn't have to be perfectly a fit for you, but they do have to let you be you. And so I've been lucky when I worked for Unilever, then I worked for PepsiCo, and then I worked for Yum. Well, even my PepsiCo experience was at KFC in Australia. I've been really fortunate that no one has tried to sort of fit me or squeeze me into some format. So I've just been tremendously lucky. And I think the reason is because you perform better when you are your true self. And, even when when I was running Taco Bell, I used to say to people, we were like the Mavericks of Yum, right? As you can probably imagine. But my point was, if you're going to be a Maverick, you have to be a successful one, because people will put up with the Mavericks if they're being successful. If you're not, they'll want to force you into whatever they believe is this thing that you have to comply with. So there is a bit of pressure on being your true self. But I'm still I will go to my grave believing that you perform better when you are your true self, even better than once you become a leader. So we go from when you first start out and you are obviously a part, but when you become a leader, I think one of your key roles is to create a culture in which everyone on your team can be their true self.
Yeah.
And so that is equally important. So as you evolve from, individual contribution to contributing as a leader, your job is in fact not necessarily so much to tell people what to do, but I mean, that's part of the job. But your job is to create an environment in which everyone on your team can be their true self. And if you can do that, then your team will truly perform differently. I'll give you a little story, and if I'm carrying on, you can tell me to stop. So when I went to Taco Bell in 2001, it was a bit of a train wreck. Sales had been declining for like 7 years, and I think everyone thought, well, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to clean house. I'm going to get rid of everybody on the marketing team, and Greg will just start all over. And of the team that was my direct reports, I only actually let one person go. That person was running a Ponzi scheme. That's probably good reason to let them go for running a Ponzi scheme. Um, but everybody else, I realized, had all these unique talents. They just hadn't been really well led. Um, and so it wasn't about getting rid of the team. It was about, as a different leader, bringing the best out of all of those people. Um, and because I think, it's funny. I love talking to young people, and everyone thinks, oh, you've got to this position because you never made a mistake. Oh no, we could spend 15 episodes on all the mistakes I've made. And so I think it's not about perfection. I heard a great story the other day, which was in the old days, and they don't have it anymore. Pencils always had an eraser on the end of them, right? And the reason for the eraser was when you make a mistake, you got to erase out what you'd made, and then you got to rewrite, a better answer. And I think that's life, which is, if we're not prepared to make mistakes, or we're not pushing the envelope hard enough. So I'm a big believer in creating cultures is one of your key requirements as a leader, and then obviously creating that environment. And then, as I said, when you're new, volunteer for the job that no one else wants to do. I did that early on in my career, and it was probably a game changer for me. I just did a job that plenty of other people had tried. And to some extent, if you do a job that five other people have failed at, well, if you fail, you're just the sixth to fail. But if you actually can deliver, then that's how you stand out.
And if I
I love
can
that, Greg.
Oh, sorry, Amy. I was just gonna say, to
Sure.
this exact point, I think you could share the story with you and Rob. When I first met Rob when we were golfing, the first thing he said is that you were pivotal in changing his career, and he's currently the CEO of Shake Shack. And he said that he gave a speech when he was at Yum, and afterward you said, "You did a bad job. You were trying to be
Yeah.
you were trying to be someone else other than yourself.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
gave the exact advice to him, and he's been nothing but successful since then. Papa John's, Shake Shack, and,
Yeah.
Rob shared that story with me that he looks at you as a mentor, and I think you're underplaying it slightly on
Oh
how.
no, it was a funny story, right? Because the previous guy that he replaced was sort of known for doing like a top 10, so he would get up there and say, oh, these are the top 10 things we've learned as an organization, and or these are the 10 things we're going to go and do, and all that sort of stuff. And the previous incumbent of that position had that was his style, right? And so Rob thinks so. I hadn't spoken to Rob, but Rob gets up there and does like a top 10, but it's completely not Rob. I mean, Rob's personality didn't come across, his character didn't come across, and he comes off stage and he goes, "How was that?" And I go, "That was bloody terrible," you know. And he goes, "What do you mean? I just did what the previous guy did." And I said, "Yeah, but you're not the previous guy." Um, and so, but I also think one of the responsibilities of a boss is to give constructive feedback. Um, and I do find that sometimes we believe that it's hard to give. It is hard to give constructive feedback, and I'll be honest. I struggle with it. It's not the easiest thing for me to give constructive feedback, but the reason it's important to do it, it's not about you. It's about the person getting the feedback so they can change their behavior.
Yep.
And to be honest, if you don't tell someone, like if either come off the stage and I said, "Oh, Rob, mate, that was awesome. High five. That was fantastic." And he's going to keep doing it. And we would never have got to see the real Rob Lynch. And Rob Lynch is brilliant and a wonderful human being. He does not need to do what Tom Wagner did. And so that's what I love, which is also you've got as a boss, one of your responsibilities besides creating culture is also to give feedback. It's also to give encouragement, by the way. I think there's this whole idea about, well, my job as a leader is just to provide feedback. I think it's equally important to provide encouragement. And I think one of the reasons we had success at Taco Bell and KFC and Pizza Hut was the recognition culture that David Novak created, which was, small wins can get recognized, medium wins can get recognized, big wins can get recognized. And it was funny because everyone said, oh, recognition might be great in Australia and the US, but they're not going to like recognition in China and Russia. This was obviously what's going on in the world today. And I think I've been to like 58 countries in my job. Every one of those people loves being recognized. So as a leader, yes, you need to give feedback, but I also I believe we don't give enough encouragement and recognition either.
I love that. I always ask people, and Matt knows this, that if I have to give somebody constructive feedback, I'll say to them, "Are you okay if I give you some feedback?" Because it helps their brain set up for
Yeah,
mentally what's about to come to them. But I
yeah,
wanted to ask on something that you brought up quite a few times on the culture piece. If you're an emerging leader and you're listening to this,
yeah,
a lot of us talk about creating that culture. And I think right now a lot of people lean in more. We know leaning it more into emotional intelligence right now is
yeah,
more than just the IQ piece because we're leading
yeah,
humans and people in a crazy
yeah,
world.
yeah.
What are your thoughts or tactics or anything that you've done in the past that they can or we can learn from on creating that culture,
Sure.
where people can show up as their authentic selves? Because creating that for large groups of people, whether you're running a Red Robin or you're running an Applebee's or
Yeah.
you're running a Taco Bell, um, a lot of the younger folks have a hard time doing that and understanding what that means. So, do you mind digging into that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And it's funny because I spend most of my time in marketing, not in restaurant operations. But in 2006, I was made the chief operating officer of Yum. And I think a lot of people thought that David Novak had probably been smoking stuff that was illegal in those days. And it sort of made us. Um, but it was interesting to me because I'd never worked in operations, and it's where the idea of the customer experience will never exceed the team member experience came up from, which was that I felt that what we did this is in the Yum restaurant, so I can't speak for anyone else. Was we ran it pretty much like it was a bit like the military to some extent, right? Which was, there's books and this is the way we're meant to do things, and this is how it's all got to be done, and it was all very much what I would call rear facing, which it was all about what happened behind the counter. So there was more manuals on how to do behind the counter. There was no discussion about basically how to improve the customer experience. And then even today, I hear a lot of companies go, well, yeah, we're going to change the customer experience. We're going to improve the customer experience. We're going to do this to improve the customer experience. what they forget is the team members are the people that actually have to execute the customer experience. And if you just think about human nature, why would I want to give the customer a better experience than my employer is giving me? And so this is where the idea of the customer experience will never exceed the team member experience came from, which is, I believe what you've got to do if you want to improve the customer experience is the first thing you've got to do is enhance the team member experience. And so what did we do at Taco Bell to do that? Well, one of the little things we did was we empowered everybody. Now, again, prices and times different. We empowered everybody that they could solve any problem up to $10. And if you think about what happens, and let's assume a customer, we'll call it $20 today, just for the sake of making it relevant. If we said to everybody, you can solve anyone, by the way, can solve any problem up to $20. So here's what tends to happen, right? So a customer gets an order that's incorrect. We'll assume it's a dining, carry out dining, whatever it is, order up. So they get an order that's incorrect and they come back and then we get into an argument about, is it right? Is it wrong? Is it hot? Is it cold? All that sort of stuff, right? And invariably, what happens is the team member has to go to the manager, then the manager has to come out, and the manager has to hear the story again, and all this sort of crazy stuff, right? And probably 99% of the time, we solve the customer problem. Okay? And so my whole point was, why not empower the team members to feel empowered? I mean, the empowerment is a wonderful thing to feel. So if I empower you to solve every problem up to $20, I'm basically saying, I trust you to solve every problem. That empowerment is a really powerful thing. I don't know whether it's still done today, maybe it's not. But for me, ultimately, you got to the same conclusion, which is usually we made the customer happy. But it took us 15 minutes to make the customer happy. We disempowered the team member because we had to go and get the restaurant general manager. And so I think we've got to look for ways. So enhancing the team member experience doesn't necessarily mean paying them more. I'm not suggesting people shouldn't be paid fairly, and I'm a huge believer in that. But if people take away enhancing the team member experience to enhance the customer experience, it's just about paying them more, then you completely miss what I'm trying to say. It's about what can you do to empower the team member in order for them to feel an empowered person is going to deliver a better customer experience than someone that's disempowered. And so I think, can you make the job easier? It was interesting. I went to a Taco Bell the other day, and they're obviously using AI to take the order, and I could tell. And I tried. I knew what was going on, so I thought I'm going to try to make this not difficult, but I'm going to try and make it tough. So I want this, I don't want that. I want this, I don't want that. I get to the drive-through, and I said to the young woman that was taking the order, because there's a big fear that AI is going to take jobs away, right? I said to her, was that AI that took my order? She goes, oh, yeah, did you know that? And I explained, I used to be at Taco Bell, blah, blah, blah. And I said to her, how do you think about this? And she goes, I love it. Yeah. And I go, what? Why do you love it? And she goes, because while it's taking the order, I'm preparing the drink. I'm making sure that I can double check that the order's correct. And so I think here's another thing about, let's think about AI, which is everyone's worried about losing jobs. But can it be made so that it enhances the team member experience? And I think that was a great example of, you're still going to need people to make food in a restaurant. You're still going to need people to hand it out the drive-through window. What I love is that's another way to enhance the team member experience. And so my challenge is probably less for the more junior people, but the more middle people and more senior people, I would challenge you to say, what are you doing? And it's not about salary, wage increases. What are you doing to enhance the team member experience? And as I said, empowerment is a way to do it. Making things simpler is a way to do it. Making things more obvious and more intuitive. So I don't think as leaders
And allowing them to show as their authentic self. Yeah.
absolutely, nobody wants to turn up and be told to say, Heidi ho every time you come into a restaurant, right? Because not everyone's comfortable saying Heidi ho. And so I think it's about, as you said, exactly, which is, it's funny because I used to say to people, look, I can't teach anyone to smile. I can teach you to make a taco, but I can't teach you to smile. And so, if you've got someone who can smile, I can teach you to make a taco. If you've got someone who makes tacos and can't smile, I don't want you, because that's not the person we're looking for. To your point, I want you to be your genuine self in that experience. And equally, I want you to, if you're in a customer facing role, the more genuine and authentic and real you are, the better that's going to go. And I think far too often we don't spend time when people start out in their careers. It's sort of like, well, this is the way we do it. This is the way we've always done it. All that sort of stuff. And we can get into the sort of the what and how. I have one of my favorite things to say to people, because everyone sort of goes, this is what I want you to do, and this is how I want it done, right? That's sort of like, well, because it's simple, it's easy, but it's not empowering. And so we'll play a little game with all of us. So if I said, well, Kim can't play because she's heard this before, but if I said to you, what two numbers together make 5, what would you say?
3 and 2.
Okay, what else?
1 and 4.
1 and 4, and 5 and 0, or the inverse of those, right? The answer is there's an infinite number of two numbers that make 5. 8 minus 3 makes 5. And so what tends to happen as leaders is we say we want it done the 3 plus 2 way, or the 4 plus 1 way, or the 5 plus 0 way. Well, what if the better way is 8 minus 3? And so I think this idea of being very clear about, as a leader, what you want done, why you want it done, explaining the why, and enabling the team member to come up with the how. Now, there are look, I know to build a bridge, a bridge has got to be built the right way. You don't just go, oh, well, we'll build bridges however we feel like it, right? But I think in a lot of the work that we do in restaurants, there is a number of ways to do the how. And I think what we do is we also just force everybody into the 3 plus 2. We'll just make it up, right? And I think that sometimes there's maybe a better answer. And as culture shifts and as times change, as what's happening in society changes, maybe 3 plus 2 was the right way to do it 10 years ago, but that doesn't make 3 plus 2 the right way to do it today. So I think this whole idea of empowering people and is one of the keys to really delivering success in a restaurant.
Greg, one thing I'd love to come back to, because I think it adds to the equation or the infinite amount of ways that we can get to the end result. But one thing you shared a couple of minutes ago was around recognition.
Yeah.
So there's so much focus, I think, as we come up as leaders, as course correcting what didn't happen as we wanted it to. But if we have infinite amount of ways to get to the outcome, what are some of the examples for an emerging leader just to really embrace recognition, or how do they have the conversation, or how do they change their mindset to see the positive?
Yeah, well, I think ultimately, I was just on the phone, I won't say, of a CEO of a Fortune 200 company. And you can imagine being the CEO of a Fortune 200 company these days is pretty tough with what's going on in the marketplace. And he basically said, it's tough and blah, blah, blah. And you know what? Occasionally I wouldn't mind a little bit of recognition. Now, you would think as the CEO of a Fortune 200 company, paid an awful lot of money, and being the CEO, life's probably pretty good, right? And his point was, I wouldn't mind the occasional bit of recognition. So I think, first of all, recognition is just powerful. And it doesn't have to be fancy. And it doesn't even have to be linked to money. I mean, people will often think, oh, well, recognition means you got to hand out, whatever they got to hand out. No, it can just be in the moment saying to someone, look, I really appreciate it. You did a great job. Thank you very much. Thanks for turning up when you didn't have to turn up. Thanks for coming and doing a shift that, you weren't scheduled to do. It can be when you do things that when you do things well, you deliver the customer a great experience. The best recognition is actually in the moment recognition. When something positively occurs, reinforcing what you saw occur is really powerful. And at Yum, we had little, cards, that you could just sort of write something on, all the way up to, I had a big, David Novak had like a walk the talk, little feet and a chattering teeth and all this sort of stuff, right? So between that and this, there's all forms of recognition. And I'll tell you why it's important. We would have family day at Taco Bell, and I would have people come up to me and say, this is like the husband or the wife or of the employee, and they'd say, hey, listen, let's say this is a guy, my wife got recognized, she got your award, she brought it home. I was really, I said to her how much she must have done a great job, and the kids loved the fact that mom had got so this is not even just what first person impact. This can have multiple impacts. And if you think it doesn't matter, then why? If you go around any of the Yum offices, anyone who's got a recognition award, I guarantee you it's sitting on their desk. And when people retire, I've had letters from people. When they retired, they took their recognition award and they put it in their office or their whatever, right? So it is a big deal. And equally, I think if you are really good at recognition in a positive way, from a culture perspective, what it enables you to do is to then have those tough discussions when maybe things aren't going the right way or when things don't work out. And it's okay to celebrate failure so long as we take away the one. It's not the failure that we're celebrating, it's that we've learned something. Go back to why is the eraser on the end of the pencil, right? And so I think if you don't have a great recognition culture, then critique becomes much more severe, interpreted as much more severe than if you've got a great recognition culture and there's the odd occasion when you say, hey, listen, I'll just pull you aside, that could have been done better. Of course, now my dog's gonna bark. So and it's, look, we all get it. I was the CEO of maybe I was maybe the chief operating officer of Yum, and we're at a board meeting and I must have said something I didn't even know. And so we had a morning tea break and David Novak called me aside and goes, hey, listen, I just don't want you to, did you know what you did in there? I'm like, oh no, I don't know what I did, right? And I had said something that I could have probably said in a nicer way. And so I don't want people to think that only junior people get coaching. We all get it. And it's, so long as you take it on board, you see it as a gift and you act on it, then I think it's very important that you get it. And so, in this case, the CEO of the company, I'm the chief operating officer, and he took his time to say, hey, you said something in the meeting. I didn't intentionally mean it to be interpreted, but he said, hey, this was interpreted by someone as not what you meant. And if he hadn't provided me that feedback, then I would have just repeated it again and again and again. So I think with a great recognition culture comes the ability to critique. I don't mean criticize, but to critique and make us better. Because sometimes if we're not told how to be better, we don't even know we've done something, and we don't know not to do it again. So all of it is really critical. But the more in the moment you can make it, great.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be about big things. It doesn't have to be about money. And then also when you can recognize, I used to love recognizing cross-functional teams, because if you want to encourage behavior in an organization, then recognizing that behavior. And so it's wonderful to recognize an individual but usually they've done individual pursuits to do it. I think one of the great things in an organization is how do you get collaboration in the organization, get out of the silos. So one of the things I really used to love to do was to recognize people in cross-functional teams who'd had success, because that demonstrated to people that, we get recognized when we collaborate as much as when we're individually, performing really well.
Kim, just the great news about what we're doing here today is this is part one. So we're going to have another episode with Greg here. But Kim, close us out for episode number one with Greg. Takeaways, questions?
No, I think that's absolutely phenomenal. Greg, of course, I appreciate, you coming on for lead. You have a plethora of knowledge that everyone can learn for daily life, for personal relationships, for work relationships that, just focus on becoming better and making sure that we scale ourselves. So I would love to thank you on behalf of the lead team just for joining us today, and obviously look forward to part two. I will turn it over to my team here and see if Amy or Kelly have any closing remarks. But I mean, everything has been absolutely phenomenal. So Kelly or Amy?
I mean, unbelievable, Greg. It's such an honor. And I think so many people have so much to learn from you. So thank you for sharing with us today. On the lead side of things, we have events coming up that we would love for you to come join and take, I would say, more knowledge just like this in a very easy, amazing setting where you will leave with your heart full, your cup full, and ready to really take on the world. Come join us in Chicago at our Sizzle in Spin event on May 17th. We still have a couple bikes available. Amy will be riding, Matt will be riding, Kim and I will be checking everybody in. And you also can come join us in Dallas on June 11th. We are hosting again another amazing event. Please come check us out. Follow us on LinkedIn. And Greg, thanks for joining us today. This was awesome.
My absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed it.